All right, so we're into types of evidence. So, two general types. Testimonial evidence is when there's a statement made under oath. So, this would be like an eyewitness would describe the person or the situation or the crime, whatever they saw. Physical evidence is any object or material that's relevant. So, this would be things we'd like collect, like hair, fibers, fingerprints, blood, any sort of impressions or markings. So when it comes to testimonial, right, an eyewitness, there's three main factors that affect how much we can trust what they say. So one is the nature of the offense and the situation where the crime is observed. If it's really violent or emotional, like that can affect your feelings, can affect how you see it or what you remember. Characteristics of the witness. So if I have really good eyesight, I might be a more reliable witness than someone who has poor eyesight, isn't wearing their glasses, or it's hard of hearing, things like that. And then the manner in which it's retrieved, like were they watching through a window? Did they hear it in a crowded restaurant? Okay, all of those things are things that can affect how reliable or how trustworthy an eyewitness can be. Additional factors would be if there's any sort of relationship with the accused. If the suspect is someone I know and care about, it might change how I see or say things. The length of time. So if you're asking me to remember something that happened 10 years ago, my memory's not going to be as good than as something that happened 10 minutes ago. If I've identified someone, let's say I'm the witness and I'm told that that person was like a plant. It was just sometimes they'll do a lineup. They'll have a police officer in there. And if I pick that and then they tell me, no, that's a police officer, I might start to question my memory. For those kind of both those last two. So when it comes to eyewitnesses, they will ask them for a description. Lots of times, that description can be found two ways. It can be through like a computer program. So there are programs where you can, and that's what they mostly do now, where they can really change every single feature about a face, or it could be an actual artist who's drawing it. Now, they don't necessarily draw it from scratch. They're going to start to draw a face, and then you as the witness are going to say things like, oh, nope, their eyes were a little bigger, or their nose was smaller, or their eyes were closer together. Okay, like changes it from what you see. 'Cause it's hard to describe someone from like absolutely nothing. Perception is reality. So what I remember, what I think I remember, right? My memory of something is what really happened, yet that might not be actually what happens. Like as soon as we think back to something, our memory has already been distorted a little bit. And as a result of this, all of this stuff, okay, physical evidence is critical. So that is the most important type of evidence. Is eyewitness or testimonial good and needed? Yes. But without physical evidence to back it up, it gets a lot weaker. All right, so the value of physical evidence, okay? It can prove that a crime has actually been committed, right? Like a body, okay? It can corroborate or refute testimony. So if I say there was a car accident and I heard brakes screeching, we might see tire treads or markings on the street, okay? It can link a suspect with a victim or with a crime scene. It can establish the identity of the persons associated with the crime. And it can allow reconstruction of events of a crime. Reconstruction is rebuilding and kind of telling the story. So using all the physical evidence to answer the questions about what took place, how the victim was killed, the number of people involved in the sequence of events. You're going to get all these pieces of information and you got to put them together in the right order with who did what to really reconstruct the whole thing. Okay, so a forensic scientist will compare the question or unknown sample when they find evidence with a sample of known origin. For example, if they find a fingerprint at the crime scene and they know, these 5 people had been there, they're going to fingerprint those 5 people to compare. Same with like a blood sample or a hair sample or any of those. All right, so five types of physical evidence, and I'll go through each one and give you some examples of them. So first is transient evidence. All right, so transient evidence is temporary. I always remember transient, temporary, okay? Both start with T. So it's easily changed or lost. It's usually observed by the first officer at the scene. So whoever is called in and gets there first, they're going to have to note this right away because these things will change or go away. So examples are when it comes to odor, right? Smells will go away. So if I show up and I smell like a gasoline smell or cigarette smoke, right? Those smells are going to dissipate. I won't smell them anymore. So I got to note them right away. Temperatures, right, will change. If anything is above or below like the room temperature, whatever that is at the time, that's going to go back to room temperature. So like if I feel a car hood and it feels warm, that means it was recently ran. Just like coffee on the counter is cold, it's been there for a while, right? Cadaver is a body. We're going to look at body temperature, right? That will change over time as well. And imprints and indentations, like footprints in like dirt or snow, those could go away. Those could be temporary as they get wiped or hit or it snows more, okay? All right, pattern evidence is produced by direct contact between a person and an object or between two objects. So these would be things like blood spatter because the blood's coming into contact with an object. Tool markings, how the body is positioned, okay? Furniture position, like if a chair is tipped over, right? Gunpowder residue, right? The gunpowder is coming in contact with you. So these are patterns. So any sort of marking kind of left behind. Conditional evidence is produced by a specific event or action. So these are really important to Reconstruction because these will tell us kind of help us figure out the order of how things happened. So light is conditional, like, okay, if the lights were on, someone might have just come in the room or they left it, right? They were there. Smoke and how that moves. And a lot of these are going to be transient also. Fire, they can figure out where it started and kind of where it's going. Same with wounds, right? If they see a wound on the head, they're gonna, right? You're gonna know like where that came from and the direction, okay? Vehicles, there's a lot with vehicles, right? Were the windows left open? Was the radio on, or was it a certain station? What's the mileage? Body, I'm gonna come back to body on the next slide. And the scene, just in general, are there things that have been disturbed that can tell us what happened and when? So body conditional evidence are these three, and you've probably seen these, where the first one is algor mortis. So algor mortis, too far. Algor mortis is first what happens to the body. It cools down, right? Your body is 98.6 degrees approximately. The room you're in is probably, or the outside even, is probably cooler than that. So your body's going to start to cool. It's going to cool about 1 to 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. So they will take the temperature. They actually push a big temperature probe into your body. I think they kind of go for the liver. And they'll check the temperature. So if your temperature is at 95, let's see, that's about 3.6 degrees cooler than where you started. So I don't know, it's probably been 4 hours-ish, okay, 3-4 hours, okay, since you died. Livor mortis is what happens next, okay? So when they start to see this happen, they know it's already been there for a little bit. It's been there for at least a half hour. Livor mortis is when your blood settles, and it's always, right, gravity is going to take over. Your blood is going to, because it's not moving through your veins and arteries, it's going to move to the lowest part of your body. So if you're laying on your back, you're going to have livor mortis, or this red purple discoloration on the bottom half of you that's in contact with the ground, right? On the back half of you, essentially. All right. Rigor or rigor mortis is when your muscles stiffen. This happens shortly after death. So this is the third part, though. It's about 2-3 hours, and then it goes away, but it can come back. So you'll know based on if rigor has set in that they've been there for a little while, but it hasn't gone away yet. Okay. All right. Transfer evidence is when things actually come in contact and leave pieces behind. So pattern is making markings. Transfer is leaving something behind. So if I leave a smear of blood or my fingerprints, right, I'm transferring something. And associative evidence are your personal belongings, okay? So like if they find my phone at the scene of the crime, okay, that would be associative evidence. It links back to me. All right. We can also classify evidence by nature. Some evidence is biological evidence, and lots of times this would be how it's analyzed. So this would be the biology unit would analyze all of these things, okay? Everything related to the body. So any sort of things you have in the body, like blood, semen, saliva, right? Sweat, hair, all of those kinds of things. Chemical evidence are fibers, that's materials, right, that make a lot of our substances, like our clothing, for example. Glass, soil, gunpowder, metal. Any sort of drugs will be chemical. Physical will be markings of all sorts of kinds, and tools, and then anything else kind of just fits in this miscellaneous, okay? All right, so evidence then gets put into two categories. So class versus individual evidence. Class evidence is common to a group of objects or persons. So class evidence cannot be linked back to one individual source. That's what individual evidence is. So fingerprints there, fingerprints are individual. The fingerprints can be determined who that they went to, which individual person, same as DNA. Let's say I find fibers at the crime scene. Fibers, right, like from my sweatshirt, for example, fibers could be found, and this isn't my only, like the only sweatshirt made with these fibers. There are other people that have the same one. I mean, other teachers are probably wearing the same Packer sweatshirt that I am. So fibers would be a class evidence, right? I can't figure out exactly which sweatshirt. I can figure out which type maybe, but not mine versus another teacher's, okay? So here's some examples, right? I just talked about fibers being class, okay? Something like this, where the tape, sometimes if that tape is cut, I mean, I could cut duct tape on a whole bunch of different rolls and it could look identical. So I might know which brand it's from, but I wouldn't know exactly which roll. All right, if it's ripped, however, and it's a jagged rip, I might be able to piece that back to the roll it came from if it has the matching other side of it. Tread marks, like shoe prints or tire prints, those tend to be class. It's not like my car is the only car that has that size, brand, and everything of tires. However, there could be individual markings within it. All right, same with my shoes. Let's say I have a wear pattern and I've worn them a certain way and they're worn down in one spot. That might be unique to my shoe, but typically those are going to be class, okay? A skull like this, right, where we could get dental records, possibly DNA, different things like that would be individual. And like broken glass, if you have the two pieces, like the source, and you can match it up, that could be individual. If it's really tiny little pieces where there's no way you could piece them back together, that would be class. All right, so that is our types of evidence. Notes.